Episode 737. One man was taken out in an instant, and the rest were stunned. The second to step forward was a knight who instinctively raised his large shield. The clang of metal on stone rang out in a steady rhythm as the poison flies slammed into his shield, one after another, a sound that somehow felt deeply reassuring. But by now his face had already turned ashen. This is a game. Blocking the poison flies with a shield doesn't mean no damage gets through. The shield's function is just to reduce damage by a percentage. But with so many venom flies swarming, the clatter of impacts ringing out like a relentless storm, the knight watched his health plummet in a straight line. He spun around, shouting for the cleric. Only then did he realize the cleric was also being chased by the poison flies, running for his life with his head down. These poison flies had built their aggro proactively. There was no way they'd all obediently target a single player. By now they'd already scattered, charging at random targets. If a player was caught alone, they had nothing to fear. But when these things lined up in that dense formation, running was the only option. The small monsters charged without warning, catching everyone off guard. With their sheer numbers and high damage, many fell in an instant. The remaining players scrambled to form a defensive line. Letting a pack of trash mobs wipe the whole raid would be a rookie mistake. The news of the attack quickly reached the guild leader, who was still in the arena. The guild that had been attacked was none other than Samsara, the very guild that had just made it into the finals and was buzzing with celebration.
What?
The moment the message reached him, Samsara's guild leader, 3 Realms 6 Paths, flew into a rage. Without a second thought, he pinned the blame on the very guild they had just crushed, Central Herb Hall. For a major guild to lose an opportunity like that, of course they'd be furious. And looking back, when the agreement was first made, the Hall of Herbs had agreed rather reluctantly. When he pressed for details, it turned out to be a poison fly attack. Of course, after all, the agreement was set in iron. Open defiance was out of the question, so they had to trip him up behind the scenes.
Despicable.
The 3 Realms and 6 Paths had already cursed out loud, and the other guild leaders, now receiving the same news, immediately knew who he was cursing. Zhang Yu, the initiator of this proposal, quickly stepped in to defend him.
Guild leader of the 3 Realms, don't rush. We haven't gotten to the bottom of this yet.
The venue was cleared by 8 guilds together. There's no way it's a system issue. If it wasn't one of our own, then who else could it be? Don't tell me this fly swarm is a random system event. You're not fooling anyone past the starter zone.
The 3 Realms and 6 Paths roared. Zhang Yu was about to persuade him further when another message arrived. His own guild had also been hit by the same poisonous fly attack, and on top of that, Blue Creek Pavilion had triggered a boss. This news gave Zhang Yu pause. He tried to stay calm and think it through. What exactly was going on here? The other guilds started kicking up a fuss too. It turned out the toxic flies weren't just targeting tyrannical ambition. They were hitting every guild. Everyone was thrown into chaos. The way those venomous flies swarmed in all at once was really hard to deal with.
This is what you call a peaceful solution.
When word got out that Blue Brook Guild had already pulled the boss, the 3 Realms 6 Paths couldn't sit still any longer. They were a guild that had already made it to the finals. Having someone stir up trouble like this meant all their earlier excitement was for nothing, so how could he stay so calm? The Jia Dynasty Guild, another that had fought through 2 rounds to stay in the tournament, immediately joined the chorus condemning Blue Brook Guild for this disruption. As for guilds like Misty Rain, Voidbreaker, and 100 Blossoms, they had genuinely hoped this method would decide the boss's fate. Now that someone was playing dirty, their fury was immediate, and they joined the other 2 guilds in flooding the chat with condemnation. And deliberately announced it on the public channel, exposing it to the audience still waiting to watch the decisive match. The watching players erupted in an uproar, and in an instant, Blue Brook Guild became the target of everyone's ire. Yi Shu glanced at the scrolling messages on Chen Guo's screen, unimpressed. He shot a message to Wei Chen's windward formation.
Just pretending Blue Brook Guild pulled the boss? Isn't that a bit too fake?
With the Iron Oath as proof, that move is just idiotic, completely unrealistic.
Hey, you have to look at the actual situation here. When something like this happens, you're already in a losing battle trying to explain yourself. But Chun Yi Lao, the guild leader of Blue Brook Guild, has some kind of issue. He seems to have a psychological block against typing in chat. You want him to talk his way out of a situation where everyone's already made up their minds? That's impossible.
Faced with Wei Chen's answer, Ye Shu fell silent. He hadn't expected Wei Chen to be so ruthless when scheming against Blue Brook Guild. Truly an Ashen-level veteran of the pro circuit with no bottom line. No humanity at all. Yi Shu sighed as they discussed, but the scene had already descended into chaos. 8 guilds were all under the swarm attack, barely able to look after themselves. They could only watch as the Marsh Hunter Reap charged straight for Blue Brook Guild, their eyes practically bulging out of their sockets with fury. As for the Blue Creek Pavilion, they were completely in the dark. The swarm of poisonous flies hadn't targeted them, so at first they were just relieved and cautiously on guard. Little did they know, the players from the other guilds had already cooked up their conspiracy theories, eyeing them with a completely different look. And finally, Blue Creek Pavilion was attacked, but not by the poison flies. No, it was the boss itself. This pretty much confirmed the conspiracy theories. If the other guilds hadn't been so swamped dealing with the poison flies, they might have already launched an attack on Blue Creek Pavilion. How could Blue Brook Guild possibly know why the boss had suddenly charged at them? It looked like someone had attacked or accidentally wandered into the boss's aggro range. The problem was, with the chaos unfolding, no one had really been paying attention.
Who?
The squad leader was still asking questions, but did the boss really have time to stop and discuss it with them? That was Marsh Hunter Rep, a dual-class assassin and thief. When he moved, speed was the only word for it. The moment he took a step, a blur of motion streaked across the field, closing in on Blue Brook Guild's front line. Both hands swept up with daggers, one held in a standard grip, the other reversed. A single thrust, a single slash, and 2 players were knocked to the ground.
Lanxi Guild is pulling the boss.
Someone nearby had already called it out.
No.
The leader of Blue Creek Pavilion quickly shouted, clearly aware that pulling the boss right now was a serious problem.
Ha! First you sick the poison flies on us. Then you go after the boss yourself. Blue Creek Pavilion, you're despicable.
The accusations kept coming. The Blue Creek Pavilion player leading the group was sweating profusely. The guild's top core members, naturally its finest experts, had all run off to the arena for PvP, leaving him in charge here, and now he was facing this mess. Flustered and panicked, he hurriedly reported to the guild leader for instructions. But the guild leader's situation was even more chaotic than his own. He'd already been buried under an avalanche of spit and scorn.
Everyone fall back. Do not retaliate.
The party leader, unable to get a reply from the guildmaster, had to give orders himself, signaling the guild members not to touch the boss in a bid to prove their sincerity. But what was Marsh Hunter Rep? This was a field boss. If it just stood there and took hits without fighting back, it wouldn't last long enough for them to catch on. If they started healing right away, they would instantly OT. The boss would charge straight for the cleric, and even if someone tried to keep them alive, they wouldn't hold out. That would spiral into a guaranteed wipe. Refusing to fight back to prove their innocence, it could work. But against the wild boss, Swamp Hunter Lipe, they'd likely pay for that proof with a full wipe. Whether the leader actually had that in mind, he never made clear. The team players had no intention of making such a noble sacrifice. If they couldn't fight back, then wasn't running the only option left. So the players scattered, not fighting back, but by running, they looked like they were trying to drag the boss away and kill it in secret, which was even more infuriating than fighting back.
They want to leave.
The other guild players, already overwhelmed by the poison flies, hadn't stopped watching this side. The boss was the real reason they'd all gathered here.
Blue Brook Guild takes the boss. Should we kill the guild leader?
Kill the guild leader or not?
For a moment, every guild leader still in the arena received that message. They were all furious. At this point, who wanted to hear any explanation from Chunyi Lao? The Three Realms and Six Paths Guild took their leave, and Chen Ye Hui of the Jia dynasty followed close behind. The other guild leaders were now caught in a dilemma.